day, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. In line with Autism Awareness Month, I will be talking about parenting and autism in this presentation. So today I hope to discuss parenting based on my understanding of what autism is. Aside from autism, this presentation will also discuss some parenting styles that work around the challenges that go with autism. I am hoping that by the end of this presentation, we'll have a better appreciation of the crucial role of parents in the growth and development of autistic individuals. Just one disclaimer, the views of personal experiences shared here are my own and do not necessarily reflect the views of the organization I am affiliated with. So I will be using the identity first language in this presentation because this is what we prefer. One reason for this preference is its emphasis on the person's identity rather than the condition or diagnosis. In this language, autism is considered a fundamental aspect of who the person is, or what self-advocates call way of being. Additionally, we believe that this language can promote acceptance and understanding of neurodiversity. Finally, it helps reduce stigma and promotes a more positive and respectful view of autistic persons. It is important to note, however, that not all individuals with autism may prefer the identity-first language. Some may prefer the person-first language. So therefore, it is always best to ask the individuals themselves what their preference is. Either way, the most important thing is to treat individuals with respect, dignity, and kindness, regardless of the language used. Language is very important for most self-advocates. There's even a movement to reclaim the word of autistic as a way of being. If you've heard of Autism Society Philippines Isang Pangako campaign, that is one way to reclaim what being autistic means to the autism community. So let me begin this presentation with my family. Our family was blessed with 2 sons and 1 daughter. I am sharing this picture and information about them with their permission. So Miles was diagnosed at 3.5 years old, and he is minimally verbal, now on the 9th grade, mainstream, and attends an inclusive class. 6 years after Miles' diagnosis came Red's formal diagnosis. He was initially assessed at 9 years old and reflected a borderline ADHD inattentive type result. After a comprehensive psychological evaluation in 2012, he was finally diagnosed with ASD at age 13. So Red graduated from Ateneo de Manila University with a BS in Management Information Systems degree. He is now a regular employee of a Hong Kong-based IT company as a junior analyst. Rain is our only girl and the middle child. She's a sophomore at the University of Buffalo in New York, and she's taking a bachelor's degree major in philosophy, politics, and economics. All my children spent their primary education in the Gulf School Community of Learners Foundation School for Children. So shout out to the Gulf community. That school implements an inclusive and progressive curriculum. They were instrumental in laying a strong foundation for all my children and on our autism journey. Part of our parenting roles has to do with determining the kind of education we want for our children. Having experienced the traditional type of education, my husband and I agreed to place our children in a non-traditional, progressive, and inclusive school. I could say that this is one of the best decisions we made, seeing how our children are as young adults. Our family had known about autism in 2007 when Miles was diagnosed. The prevalence rate of autism back then was 1 in 110. Now, 16 years after, the prevalence rate is at 1 in 36. So given the increase in prevalence, there's a greater need to raise awareness about it. It is interesting to note that the findings of studies on the sibling recurrence rate. This is the probability of a child having ASD with 1 or more siblings with ASD in the family. So the rate according to the 2011 study, was 6.1% to 18.7%. And there's a threefold increase among males based on this 2017 study. So we were not surprised when we found out that Red is autistic himself 4 years after my diagnosis. Long before Red was even assessed, I already had my suspicion. So looking back, there were red flags, but too subtle to notice as something significant. So to parents out there, be familiar with the red flags. My understanding of autism changed over time. So back in 2007, I looked at autism as a puzzle to be solved. At present, however, we see autism as a way of being. Trying to understand autism is the same as understanding any person. We should look at the totality of the person. That as a person, they have inherent rights like everyone else. Unfortunately, how society understands disability directly affects how disabled persons are valued and treated in society. The creation and development of social services for disabled persons rely on this understanding of disability. So let's check the primary models of disability and see what models we follow. There are two main models of disability that I think most of you are familiar with. The first one is the medical model or functional model. This model emphasizes medical diagnosis, treatment, and rehabilitation to fix or to cure the person's disability so they can conform to societal norms. The other model of disability is the social model, or also known as the human rights model. This model emphasizes the need for society to adapt and accommodate the needs of individuals with disabilities, rather than expecting them to change to fit in. The focus is on removing barriers and promoting inclusion rather than on medical treatment and rehabilitation. This model recognizes that disability is a natural part of human diversity and that individuals with disabilities have the same inherent rights and dignity as everyone else. It also emphasizes the importance of the full and meaningful participation of individuals with disabilities in all aspects of society, including education, employment, political, and social life. As parents, we are more inclined to lean on the social model of disability when advocating for our autistic children. Imagine if government services use this model when crafting laws and policies for our country. Through this model, advocates and self-advocates continue to push for a more inclusive, diverse, and equitable society where all individuals are valued and supported to reach their full potential, regardless of their abilities or differences. Now let's review how one is diagnosed with autism. According to the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, version 5 or DSM-5, autism spectrum disorder is a neurodevelopmental disorder characterized by deficits in social communication, social interaction, and restrictive, repetitive patterns of behavior, interests, or activities. To be diagnosed with autism, one must satisfy two conditions. First, they must display symptoms in two main areas and must be present in the early developmental period. Second condition is when the condition causes significant impairment in social, occupational, or other important areas of functioning or setting. So the two main symptoms or the main areas must be observable in different settings, not only in one setting. Autism is a lifelong condition. It does not go away. In cases where the symptoms are no longer detectable, studies and testimonies attribute this to better coping skills, masking skills, or better self-regulation skills. Finally, DSM-5 recognizes that there is a wide spectrum of symptoms and levels of impairment associated with ASD, and that every individual with ASD is unique in their presentation and needs. So to illustrate this, let's understand autism as a spectrum. So try to imagine the colors of the rainbow with different hues and intensities. Autism is not a linear progression from severe to mild. It's like this wheel on the left. Uh, Terms like high functioning or low functioning are harmful and should not be used anymore. Instead, DSM-5 specifies three levels of severity based on the level of support that an individual requires. So when you see this, so when dealing with autistics, some may need high support in a certain area, but low support in other areas of functioning, sometimes even depending on the situation they are in. Autism should be viewed as a complex web of intersecting traits and characteristics that can manifest differently in different individuals and at different points in time. So to illustrate this, let's check the circle on the right. Notice how each color varies in degree, and the colors represent the different areas of functioning, and the use of each color represent the levels of support they need. The light colors represent very little support, while the dark colors mean they need a significant amount of support. So to illustrate this even more, let's take the case of Red and Miles. In the area of communication, let's say the area of communication is the one colored orange. Let's refer to the wheel on the left. The orange part is the communication area. Miles could be the dark orange, in the dark colored orange space, while red may be in the very light colored orange in that area, of functioning. So this color orange, dark orange for Miles, can change to lighter orange when he is at home, as opposed to when he is at school. The color might be dark orange. Same goes with red. It can change depending on the setting where they are in. So by understanding autism this way, we are able to take into account the unique experiences and stress of each person on the spectrum. Knowing this, we get an idea of what areas we need to focus on more. They are the areas of weakness, and what areas we need to focus on less, or the areas of strength. This also shows the need for a highly individualized approach to helping autistics. Because everything is individualized like everyone else, no two autistics are the same. Some autistics are non-speaking, while others speak fluently and eloquently. So this is an example of Philip Reyes and Ido Kidar are non-speaking autistics, while Dr. Temple Grandin is a highly verbal autistic. Depending on their unique profiles, they have their own sets of IEPs, diet, etc. So as parents, we must do our part to get to know our children and see how they experience the world from their perspective. So to understand autism even more, let's try to listen to what they have to say. Their voices are worth listening to and worth learning from. I have better understanding and better view of their world through the experiences shared by self-advocates like Philip Reyes, who is a non-speaking autistic. So allow me to read what Philip has to say with his permission, and to quote, let's pretend you are like me. You can't talk, but you have a well-functioning mind and can understand people. Imagine you answer everyone who says something to you, but only you can hear it. Others hear your voice saying things you don't necessarily mean. They think that's all you are capable of thinking. People see your repetitive flapping or tapping and they think it serves no purpose. They don't understand that the minute you stop, the moment is flooded with lights that hum, loud sounds that echo, kids moving too fast for you to keep up with, and people trying to engage with you. It is hard on me to put my steaming away, but I try. So, end of quote. Philip emphasized the sensory issues they experience. Imagine being bombarded by sensory input from different directions. Then you are expected to focus on the instruction being given to you. Because of the difference in the wiring of their brain and different sensory makeup, they experience the world in a different way. So, as parents, it is important to know what works for them: the texture of the food, the smell of the environment, the intensity of the light, the tone of sounds. All these we need to consider when figuring out the type of accommodation they need to be able to perform tasks with everyone else. Sensory integration techniques help in dealing with these challenges. This is crucial in developing self-regulation skills when faced with sensory issues. Self-advocates is also a good source of information if one wants to have a deeper understanding of autism. So here is a short list of what they need. Many self-advocate autistics emphasize the importance of acceptance and understanding of autism as a neurodiverse condition. They prefer to be respected and valued for who they are, rather than being seen as broken or in need of fixing. They are sensitive and they can sense if they are truly accepted. One can gauge this with the quality of engagement they develop when interacting with others. While Miles cannot talk the way Red does, by willingly working with another teacher and complying without any push from my end, I can tell he feels safe and comfortable with that particular teacher in school. I do not mind the grades. I am happier that he's able to work with others and does his part in school. Also, he does not even allow me to be beside him during his online classes. Some self-advocate autistics find it helpful to receive training in communication and social skills to improve their interactions with others. However, they prefer approaches that are respectful and that emphasize building on their strengths rather than focusing on deficits. So, others think sensory integration therapy can help. Um, Many self-advocate autistics use assistive technology to support their communication, organization, and daily living skills. They prefer technologies that are easy to use and individualized to their needs. Some non-speaking autistics resort to technology to communicate, like Philip Reyes and Ido Kedar. Red uses alarms or apps rather than charts and journals so as not to forget important schedules or to monitor his diet or weight. Self-advocate autistics value their own voice and the ability to advocate for themselves. They prefer approaches that empower them to make their own decisions and choices. So when we talk of interventions for autism based on my experience with my child, it makes a whole lot of sense to take the holistic approach. We cannot turn a blind eye to what's happening in our children's bodies. We can always just rely on the observed behaviors because the core characteristics of autism are behavioral in nature. Again, we need to look at our autistic children in their totality. So we need to consider the body, the mind, the behavior, and emotions, the way we look at any individual. Parents usually feel helpless when we talk about interventions. If we get involved and try to act as case managers for our children, the feeling is empowering since we see ourselves as part of a collaborative effort in helping our children with their challenges. In terms of intervention, parents should understand that what works for one might not work for another. Banning one intervention totally in favor of the current gold standard might do more harm to others who could possibly benefit from it. One example is the rapid prompting method, which is the method that helped non-speaking autistics like Philip and Ido to communicate and connect with the world. Another example is dietary interventions in 2007 were controversial. but at present it is now recognized as one of the best ways to help improve the quality of life of children with special needs, even neurotypicals. So just like typically developing individuals, autistics also experience certain health problems. Recognizing this health condition does not mean we look at our children as broken and that they need fixing. Acknowledging this health condition is detrimental to the improvement of the quality of life of our children. These studies were conducted to better understand the bodily function of most autistic individuals. A study by Albert Beltardi in 2021 revealed some medical comorbidities that go with the condition. A separate study by Hours et al. In 2022 revealed that 50 to 70% of autistics have ADHD as a comorbid condition. Studies show that children who enjoy good health have a better chance of learning. This applies to all children, including our autistic children. Now, bombarding a child with therapies without addressing medical issues like GI issues, for example, is not helpful. Take, for example, the case of Miles. Miles was a sickly child when he was young. We frequent emergency rooms of different hospitals when he had febrile seizures. Doctors cannot seem to figure out what needs to be done. When we were in that situation, we tried to look for ways and answers for ourselves. I did my due diligence. I studied and listened to what science had to say about it. Laboratory results showed Miles is highly allergic to dairy. So back in 2007, dietary interventions are treated as a very controversial intervention. Miles performed better in school and responded better to therapies when his GI issues were addressed medically. His skin problems, sleep problems, and allergy symptoms, colds, flu, diarrhea, cleared when we changed his diet. He was also treated for yeast infection and underwent heavy metals detoxification under the guidance of a special doctor. Imagine if we did not do all those things. Um, Imagine if we will still feed Miles with milk that is uh, very harmful for him. So let us talk about what is normal. It is usual practice to think that the minority should fit in the norm because they are the majority. For those with neurodevelopmental disabilities, however, the case is different, especially when we talk about milestones. We can use milestones as a guide, but as parents, we need to realize and accept that our children are different and most likely tend to follow a different developmental track or path. If they don't meet a particular milestone, think that it is not the end of the world. When one forces the square peg to fit in a round peg, parts of it are chipped off. The square peg is no longer a true square peg. It actually becomes distorted. So this figures shows how forcing autistics to fit in can cause more harm than good. Neurodivergent reports mental health issues. Some are treated with depression and even PTSD. Worse, there are also reports of self-harm because of the things that this group of people needs to deal with almost on a daily basis. They need to be accepted for who they are and for the way they are. An ounce of kindness for a neurodivergent may mean the world to them. So parents like me pray for kindness from society as a whole for the sake of our children. Together with our children, what we envision, hope, and strive for is a society that is inclusive. It is a society where all individuals, regardless of their abilities, background, or characteristics, are valued, respected, and have equal opportunities to participate and contribute to society. Overall, an inclusive society is one where diversity is embraced and everyone is supported and included in all aspects of society. It is a society where all individuals reach their full potential, regardless of their abilities or differences. Be it neurodiverse or neurotypical, our parental involvement in the upbringing of our children varies on the stage of development they are currently in and of the values we uphold. So, as parents, our parental involvement in different aspects of our children's lives matters. We need parental involvement that observes boundaries or limits. It has to be respectful of the needs of oneself and others. It has to be proactive. We observe that there are crisis situations that appears during transition stages. So because of this understanding, we anticipate these crisis situations before they happen. Parental involvement must also be mindful of the needs of the child and of oneself and others. We need to be consistent but flexible. We need to accept and anticipate change happening at any point. You cannot always predict what's going to happen, so anticipate. While we strive to be consistent, we should teach our child to be flexible at times. They have to learn how to be flexible when things change, because that's what real life is. It's not predictable most of the time. So parental involvement must also be collaborative. We should work with different teachers, therapists, practitioners. It has to be progressive. We accept diversity and neurodiversity. We should presume competence from our children. Doing so will give them more confidence in what they do and develop belief that they can do things on their own. But this belief in competency must also be matched with an acceptance of their limitations. We have to believe that they have their own way of dealing with their challenges, and we can only step in when needed, and keep the communication open. In our case, we choose not to shield our children from the realities of life. Issues of bullying, politics, and even death are just one of the things we talk about in our family. So it is our own way of preparing them for living independent life. So if there are things that the neurodiverse individuals need, there are also a list of what parents need. So this is a short list. I am sharing this to inform others so that they will have an idea of how to help parents with the challenges that go with parenting. So we needed more time, self-care and healthcare, financial support for critical expenses. We also need support system, especially in our families and friends. We also need reassurance from others and some compassion as well. We need guidance, some form of guidance, and also access to information and resources. And the last one is skills development. So to end this presentation, let me share a famous quote from Dr. Temple Grandin. Autism, and I quote, autism is not a tragedy, ignorance is. The tragedy is that people with autism are not understood. And this applies to all parents of autistic children. The challenge is to help parents see the beauty in difference and the strength in diversity. So That's all, and thank you for listening up to this point.